Welcome to On Cloud, the podcast for cloud professionals, where we break down the state of cloud computing today and how you can unleash the power of cloud for your enterprise. Now, here's your host, David Linthicum.
Welcome back to the On Cloud podcast. Today, I am joined by Tony Witherspoon, CTO, AWS Alliance, and today we're going to recap and discuss this year's reInvent. How you doing, Tony?
Doing well. Well, as you could say, for coming back from Las Vegas on a red eye, but made it back home safely. So all is good.
Yeah, those are tough, but I appreciate you coming on the podcast and giving us a recap because a lot of people go to reInvent every year. It's kind of a pilgrimage. I call it cloud computing Woodstock, but the majority of people in the industry can't make it. And so they love to get recaps and lists of what actually occurred because it does define a lot that's going on in the cloud computing industry in general. So, and then I think that the evolution that occurred over the last 10 years is we went to vendor-led technology strategy. So we're following vendors in essence. So the innovations that they do, enterprises have a tendency to align behind them. So it's an interesting switch that occurred in the last 20 years. And so in the large vendor conferences, which used to be just things are in hotels and the other things were done by standards consortiums and magazines and things like that. Now it's back. The vendors are the primary make or break events going forward. And I suspect this was none different. So what was the energy like? What was the feeling? There's always a feeling there that's always different from the year before.
Yeah. So coming off what we call the post-COVID, right after COVID was in 2021. It was a smaller conference. Last year it got bigger. I think I've heard numbers around 50,000 attendees last year. And then when I was talking to our partners over at AWS, their estimate was probably about 70,000 attendees this year. And I totally agree with you is that I feel like some of these reInvents, they had different themes. So I need to kind of look back. It was all about when they initially started, providing infrastructure as service. And then there was like 1 year where it felt like the theme was all about serverless when they introduced Lambda. Then it was IoT and things like that. And definitely this year, and probably at most technical conference, it was around AI and Gen AI and large language models and things of that nature. That was the feeling around the conference. And I guess the other thing I noticed was I met a lot of people for this year. This was their actually first reInvent or maybe their second one. So a lot of new entries into the AWS marketplace.
Yeah, I know a lot of people are planning for the next reInvent in 2024, this week and getting back. Because I think if you're in the industry, it's kind of like if you're going to attend one event, if someone's, what's the one event to attend? I would tell them at reInvent's probably the smartest one to attend because everybody's going to be there. I understand it's led by a vendor, but there's a lot of free thinking going on and how to leverage the technology. And, kind of my feeling this year was that it was a little bit more open. So it didn't feel like a walled garden as much anymore. It seems to be reaching out to partners, even other cloud providers. It seemed like there had some multi-cloud offerings that are starting to move up. I did see that the cloud management platform that they use is now going to extend to control other clouds, which is kind of a game changer. That just kind of fell off everybody's radar and see anybody, retweet that or anything else. But it's kind of huge. In other words, we're actually managing a heterogeneous multi-cloud environment and can do so with some tools that are being produced by a cloud provider. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that's definitely not just AWS, but other partners. Just you have a multitude of different customers and different customers' objectives and needs. And it's all really about meeting them where they are, right? So be it multi-cloud. I had a lot of discussions around AWS has, the virtual compute and things like that. But then sometimes customers really need to get down to the core infrastructure, the compute and GPU layer. And so had a lot of customers talk to me about, it was launched several years ago, but AWS is bare metal instances and things like that, right? Just there's so much analytics and computing power that you need and so trying to get as close to that as possible. So AWS comes with these services every year, right? And so it's not just kind of like this one size fits all, right? It's basically fit for purpose. And so if you have a need, they have a service, or if they don't have it, they'll build it for you.
Yeah, and I think that's a step in the right direction. I think, every year I would do a prediction of what was going to be announced in reInvent, and it's always like, I think they're going to open up their infrastructure and become more open and interrelatable and more open integration with other systems than they are now, and kind of move away from kind of the walled garden view into the fact that we have to exist in an ecosystem. Obviously, we need to play around with existing legacy systems and even work with different cloud providers. And now that we have generative AI kind of moving in there, it's going to become even more heterogeneous with lots of things that reside on premise, and maybe the data stays on premise and the LLM stay in the cloud. And so we're getting into, kind of ubiquitous computing world where any platform is going to be fair game to run your applications. And we're going to optimize the platforms that we run based on the solutions and applications. Sometimes that's going to be AWS. Sometimes it's going to be something else, and edge computing, mobile computing, things like that. So we're moving into this very complex world. And I think that organizations or technologies, AWS, probably the primary provider there, who understand that and open up their infrastructure to make that happen and enable their customers to be successful, are going to be successful into themselves. So one of the things that also was a pleasing thing, even though generative AI was kind of the star of the show, it wasn't really like the other cloud conferences I was, monitoring remotely, a generative AI conference. It seems like all cloud conferences really just kind of focus on generative AI, which is fine. I understand why we're doing that. But you got to remember that most of the rank and file enterprises out there are interested in next generation storage capabilities and compute capabilities and database capabilities. And AWS seemed to put enough focus on that where, those people didn't feel like they were left behind like they were at some of the other conferences. What are your thoughts on that?
Exactly. And so one of the things that I really enjoy at reInvent is Werner's keynote. And he definitely talked about generative AI a little bit, but then he did pay homage to just AI in general, right? And so he kind of went back and said, okay, generative AI is cool, large language models, but there's all these other capabilities that we were doing with machine learning and AI that we shouldn't miss the boat on, right? So when generative AI came out and it was all the buzz and it was like, okay, how can we use large language models to do X, Y, and Z? But that might not be fit for purpose, right? And so he gave out a number of different examples like drones and things like that doesn't necessarily need generative AI, right? But it needs AI. And then I also remember kind of talking with colleagues is like, how do we define AI? Like, what is it? Isn't it just software and algorithms and things like that? And what makes it AI? Because a lot of times we do a lot of brainstorming with internally or with clients, and we come up with AI use cases. And sometimes they're just good business, requirements or goals and things like that, but they don't necessarily need AI, right? And so that's kind of like what we have to kind of balance when we have these new technologies and there's a lot of hype around it, is that not try to go find solutions or find problems for this technology to fit. Let's go back, look at the business and try to figure out what technology we can use to help progress the business.
Yeah, and I think that's the big risk moving forward with generative AI. I kind of went through the AI revolution. It was my first job out of college, back in the 80s, believe it or not. And it was very hot for a few years and just kind of went away. And what happened was people were trying to over apply it using different business cases. AI had no value in being applied. And we look at a lot of the applications out there that you certainly can enhance them by, leveraging generative AI as a foundational technology for the application solution, but it doesn't fit everywhere. And I think that in many instances, and I see this going on now, people are kind of force fitting what they think is going to be the cool technology to any number of business cases, even if it's just doing transactional sales recording and things like that. AI adds cost. It's going to cost more to the compute, some of the specialized processors that are starting to be released now. If you're looking to use those going to cost more. And certainly the training data and the storage data is going to cost more and even cost more to run an operation. So we kind of have to pick our battles here, don't you think? Was that kind of well understood at the conference, or did people say AI all the way, we're going to imply it everywhere we can?
I don't think we're there where we got to pick our battles. I think it's definitely still AI all the way. That's where all the excitement is. I think that's where a lot of company investments are. It's probably a whole lot easier to get investment approved if you put the word AI somewhere in the abstract. So I think that's where it is. And then I think, the overused analogy of where I think we should be thinking about is kind of skating where the puck is going to be, not where it is today. And I think that's where, other enterprises and, technology companies like Deloitte, we can help with that, right? Because I think a lot of the problems that we're solving with Gen AI are either probably not the right use cases or the easier ones, but to where we need to be in 3 to 5 years is where I think we need to spend a lot of our focus on.
Yeah, so the value of a trusted advisor, someone who's technology agnostic, doesn't have a dog in the hunt, so to speak, and the ability to kind of pick the right space and look at this objectively. I think ultimately those are the companies who do that are going to win the game. That doesn't mean they're not going to leverage generative AI, but they're going to target it at a certain number of problem domains and a certain number of use cases. And I think that's really key to winning all this, because you can't do everything. And also there's enterprises out there that have absolutely no plans to move to generative AI systems. And so they're just trying to keep their transactional sales order systems, manufacturing systems running. I'm sure some of them are walking around the conference as well. And you got to kind of make sure that we don't leave those behind, because it's kind of core to what makes cloud computing valuable, the ability to replace existing on-premise infrastructure with something that's going to be held on demand, that's going to do a better job, and it's going to be the best, more optimized path to make it happen. So let's talk about the specific announcements. Well, obviously, we're not going to go through all of them. You can read that online. What were some of the ones that excited you?
I'll tell you something that excited me, but I was having a discussion at the conference, and then we talked about earlier in discussion about themes. This one, the theme was definitely AI. However, it felt like when you watch one of those movie trailers and you watch the trailer, you felt like you watched the whole movie, but just watching the trailer, like I already knew or kind of assumed that the theme was going to be AI. And so that part didn't excite me as much. But one of the things that I really liked is we do a lot of previews with AWS and different services and things like that. And so seeing a preview, prior to reInvent, and then seeing the announcements and seeing how it's evolved even in that short period of time is pretty exciting. So one of the things we had, I think a lot of people talked about, was Amazon Q. And so how it's kind of built into the console, how it can support in a number of different areas, like built into your IDE and things of that nature. And Werner also talked about it as well. And I had this feeling, just kind of working with AWS over the last dozen years, is that when I first started working with it, it was probably like 12 services. And I can't even tell you how many number of services now. And he just said on stage, he's like, you can't be an expert in all these services, right? But Amazon Q can be, right? You can be your SME, kind of your sidecar along with you. And you can ask it questions, so you don't have to be, right? You can be broadly across all these AWS services, but if you need to get deep, you had the sidekick Amazon Q to help you out with that. And so lots of people were talking about it. So looking forward to it over the next couple of weeks as we get to the holidays, kind of dig deeper on some of these announcements.
Yeah, and that's going to really kind of define how we interact with these systems, the ability to communicate. And that's something I think that the other players are getting right. And I think AWS has to get that right. They understood that. So that's why we saw Q release. But it's going to be the interface into how we do collaboration, how we do coding. And it's going to be a number of ways that we get in and access the system. And I like the fact that instead of talking about, kind of the core cool capabilities, they talk about the underpinning infrastructure as to what Q is and how it can be applied in so many domains, and the ability to kind of take your business to the next level by using this particular technology. And so I thought it was great for them to focus on that. And I think that's going to really kind of enhance their use of generative AI and other technologies for that matter. So what were some of the other announcements?
I also like when it's talking with Adam and he had the talk with CEO from NVIDIA, and it kind of gives this balance, because when AWS first came on scene, it was all about, the infrastructure services and things like that. But as things evolved, you got closer to the business and business capabilities. And so how to accelerate people. So, Amazon has all these building blocks, but then also Amazon builds services leveraging those building blocks. When they talk about all the other announcements, like with the H200 chips, and we had an interlink between the different GPUs, because if you need multiple GPUs in a single instance and things of that nature. And so it kind of links back to, okay, homage or not homage, but how Amazon was built, right? These core infrastructure services, it balances that with then also, straight to consumer type services like Amazon Q, where you can use that to leverage, insights across your internal enterprise, right? So I really love the beginning of Adam Selipsky's keynote with NVIDIA, because it kind of brings you back down to the roots of why AWS exists today.
Yeah, and also the fact that we're building things out of component parts, and they're talking about the component parts, not necessarily, the cool interface layers, things like that, which I thought was probably overemphasized in the other cloud conferences this year. And the great thing about Amazon is they really kind of focus on how you build and deploy this stuff. They're, obviously a company of developers and makers, and it kind of comes out in how they look and present their products. And so the piece part component stuff, from the very sophisticated down to the lower primitive levels, how you leverage these building blocks in certain ways to create unique bespoke solutions that are going to have value specifically to you, not something that's going to be all in, things like that. I just think it's a better approach to doing it, and that's probably, gets down to their success. So what other announcements kind of got you excited?
So not necessarily an announcement. Werner did this one thing where he took this moment to say, I keep telling you that using these building blocks for easies, and you can use our services to enable your business quickly. And so he went through this story where he went to go find a problem, and he went back to his roots of, working in radiology and what were the main issues. And so he had a bunch of conversations with them, and he built, a model within SageMaker to scan, images and to find out if someone's had a stroke as early as possible, because every second that someone had a stroke, they're losing brain cells. And so he kind of walked through it and showed how he started from beginning, importing the images into SageMaker, analyzing it and producing these results, and basically send story like, if I can do it, then you guys can do it. And so I thought that was pretty cool, because it kind of takes a personal story into wherever you're at. And I'm not just saying these are, easy services because I work at AWS. I've actually went through that process, right? And so it kind of speaks to me, because as I get progressed through my career, I get to spend less and less time, hands-on with the technology, which is kind of why a lot of us got into this technology business, because we like solving problems, we like coding, we like trying things out. We like not necessarily seeing them fail, but we like seeing when we see those error messages, actually fix them, right? And so to me, just kind of speak to that, how easy it is to use these services. And then also, it's good to go back and kind of experience those things that you did, at the beginning of your career as well.
Yeah, and I like the theme, the frugal architect. And I think that's a great message to send, because I think we're at a point right now, and we made a lot of mistakes over the last 4 years, certainly around the pandemic, where we may have moved too quickly to the cloud and not done the things to make our systems as optimized as possible. And I think, I look at those things when they saw the big bills that came in 2022, and most of the time those are self-inflicted wounds, because we didn't have a frugal architecture, kind of mentality when we went at this. And it's kind of refreshing to see someone who's a CTO of a public cloud company to kind of stress the fact that at the end of the day, we need to get down to the fundamentals and how we build and deploy these things. So even though the technology layers on top, and certainly the generative AI stuff is cool and neat, and all the cool kids are going to do it, I think we're moving back to, and I look at this in 2024, that we're going to get into this optimization trend where we're going to not only build net new systems, they're going to be more highly optimized. And certainly we have some tools, even the Gen AI tools, to allow us to hone and measure these things. But the ability to go back and optimize existing systems, I mean, we call it modernization, the ability to kind of take everything into a cloud native infrastructure, things like that. But we built up so much technical debt in many instances in moving to the cloud. That seems to be the next path moving forward. That doesn't mean we're not going to continue to move to the cloud, but we're going to go back, loop back, and optimize these systems that are under optimized. And certainly when we move forward with generative AI, they got to be optimized, because they're going to just burn too many resources if they don't. So we need to think about how we do things in a frugal, sustainable, growable way. And it was key to me that message is coming out of an AWS conference, that needs to be a problem.
Yeah. So there was a couple of announcements that new services that haven't had a chance to look into that may address some of those, right? And so there was CloudWatch application signals, and then also AWS My Applications, where it kind of does a lot of this observability for you, right? And so you don't have to do it from scratch. And so if that's anything that anybody's interested in, I would definitely go look into those services. And then someone kind of jokingly, we had like a chat going between some people are actually at the venue watching the keynote. Some people are at different like watch parties, or they might be sitting in their hotel room streaming it, right? When Amazon Q came out and it's integrated in the console, like, wouldn't it be good if I can just, in natural language, ask Amazon Q how to optimize my application, or what's the cost and what are the key things, and create dashboards and things like that, where you don't have to be an expert in Cost Explorer or use expensive third-party tools to do that. And it's just built into the application using AI.
Yeah, that would be amazing. I think that we're doing self-inflicted wounds, maybe because we're moving too fast. The ability to do those things fast and come to those conclusions quickly, and even the ability to integrate with things like FinOps. So we're moving forward, we're going back and looking and second-guessing a lot of the architectural changes that are made, and even looking out at the different technologies, and having models that are able to understand what's going on currently, and the ability to look at the opportunities to integrate that technology in your existing applications and solutions. I mean, I'm an architect by trade. It's going to make our jobs easier moving forward, and it's going to federate a lot of stuff that needs to be federated in the hands of the people that really kind of make a difference. Anyway, final thoughts on 2023?
2023. Yeah, I think it was AI. And then 2024 is all about how do we leverage this in the best way possible.
Yeah, and I was going to ask you, what do you think we're going to be talking about next year at this time when we do the recap? Putting you on the spot here. Is it just going to be using these technologies effectively, or is it going to be some kind of a net new technology, a la generative AI, that we're going to be talking about next year?
I don't think it's going to change. I think we're going to be advanced a little bit more on the AI side. I guess the other thing, and it's been over the last couple of years, we've been talking about industry-led solutions, right? So how do we use AI for automotive or retail, consumer products? I think it's going to get more focused in that area or financial service. Like, how do we help our clients directly leveraging these technologies? What I've seen in Deloitte, we've done a lot of proof of concepts and prototypes and things like that. Hopefully, by the end of 2024, we'll actually have more tangible use cases on how we leverage these technologies. And then I also think, like, if we can leverage it in one industry, other industries are different, right? But we can kind of take a 20% pivot and kind of use like some of the same patterns or insights to help other areas as well.
Yeah, I think that's a sound prediction. I think 2024 is about us getting this right and the ability to have pragmatic use cases for all of this technology. I think some of them are being implemented now, but the sky's the limits in terms of supply chain optimization, the ability to apply these particular vertical spaces, finance, healthcare, things like that, like the healthcare use case that Werner's had. But, I think the sky's the limit. And so I think we're getting to a healthy state at cloud computing. It's been around 15 years. People are starting to use it, starting to make mistakes, but we're starting to course correct and starting to layer technology on there really is going to make a difference. So where can we find out more about you on the web, LinkedIn, profile, social media that you do?
I don't do a lot of social media. I am on LinkedIn, so I try to communicate on that as much as I can.
Yeah, reach out to Tony. He certainly knows the AWS infrastructure, but cloud in general. So make sure to follow him as well. So if you enjoyed this podcast, make sure to like us, rate us, and subscribe. You can also check out our past episodes, including those hosted by my good friend, Mike Cavas. Find out more at DeloitteCloudPodcast.com. All one word. If you want to contact me directly, you can email me at dlinthicum. That's LINTHICUM at Deloitte.com. So until next time, best of luck with your cloud journey. Stay safe. Cheers.
Thank you for listening to On Cloud for Cloud Professionals with David Linthicum. Connect with David on Twitter and LinkedIn. And visit the Deloitte on Cloud blog at Deloitte.com/US/Deloitte-on-cloud-blog. Be sure to rate and review the show on your favorite podcast app. This podcast is produced by Deloitte. The views and opinions expressed by podcast speakers and guests are solely their own and do not reflect the opinions of Deloitte. This podcast provides general information only and is not intended to constitute advice or services of any kind. For additional information about Deloitte, go to Deloitte.com/about.